Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Vienna from the Human Rights Channel here at Witness. Today on Witness Live, we are going to discuss the use of video in documenting the protests and human rights violations in Venezuela and the Middle East. We'll be discussing the various challenges that activists, filmmakers, and human rights lawyers are facing in using video as documentation. Here on the Hangout, I have with me Irene Herrera, a professor, filmmaker, and founder of Video Venezuela. I also have Mayss Al-Zoubi, who is the regional consultant here at Witness, a video activist and trainer from Syria. I have Gustavo Zambrano, who is the editor and videographer at Voces Sin Derechos, or Voices Without Rights. I also have with me Maya Malani, who is a video activist based in Syria. So why don't we take a moment and have each of you just tell us a little bit about yourselves. Starting with Irene.
Hi, my name is Irene. Thank you for this initiative. So basically, once the protest started, I began to realize there was a really huge need to curate and verify some of the video and footage that was coming out. And that's when sort of my work became more intense. And I'm here to discuss that today.
Thanks. Mayss, can we have you go next?
Hi, and again, thank you, Vienna, for all of the efforts, and thank you, Irene, for this inspiring idea. My name is Mayss, and I have been working with Witness for almost 2 years now. Since the beginning of the revolution in Syria, the video has played a very key role in turning the eyes, in putting the spotlight on on the human rights violations that are happening in Syria. And early 2012, I have been one of the people who was trained by Witness on how to use the video for documentation and advocacy. And now I am trained with Witness, and I work with so many video activists in Syria.
Okay, thank you, Mayss. Gustavo, can we have you go next?
Yes, sure. My name is Gustavo Zambrano. I've been an editor for 20 years, a videographer also. And yeah, in February we started with all this protests in Venezuela. We started seeing the need for true video, since all the confusion, all the videos were so confusing. We needed to find a way to deliver the truth. So that's why we created Voces Sin Derechos.
Thank you, Gustavo. Maya, can we have you go now? Maya. Right, so it seems like Maya might be having some audio problems. Hopefully she can come back with us, but let's get started. So since the protests in Venezuela back in February, there has been increasing government censorship of the media. Almost immediately, the signal of NTN 24, a Colombian news channel, was pulled from airing on Venezuela cable. Also, CNN Spanish journalists attempting to cover the protests were asked to leave the country and were denied press credentials. This repression of media has resulted in protesters, students, and activists using their mobile phones and cameras to document the protests themselves and share these images and videos with the world. Irene, I'd like to start with you. You mentioned that Venezuelan activists were unprepared to effectively document the protests. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. When the protests began, actually, I think that many people weren't prepared for what was going to happen on the ground. There have been over 2,000 detentions, 2,600 or something like this until the date. And people were simply not prepared to be detained while protesting or while filming. So that was the first thing that happened. Second of all, of course, a lot of their equipment was confiscated. At some point it was confiscated by security forces or policemen, but sometimes it was just simply stolen by other groups. So this is another challenge they face. I think many people weren't expecting this. Also, they didn't have the proper applications for chatting or for delivering the information that maybe were more encrypted than, let's say, WhatsApp or other type of applications. So there was little knowledge in this regards in terms of having the right software, the right equipment, or just simply the right applications to be able to deal with the footage that they were able to obtain and to keep it safe. So that was one thing that that we saw definitely an improvement as the protests continued. People began to be a little bit more careful with this. And then there was also the shared roles. Some people were actually protesting and filming at the same time, so they weren't sure if if they were there to protest, if they were there to document, or if they were there to serve as citizen journalists. And I think as time also developed and as the events developed, they began to see a need to really determine what they were there for at the protests, because that could determine whether they were going to be detained or not. So that was another trend that we also saw.
Right. Thank you. Gustavo, do you have anything to add here about the specific challenges you've seen students, activists, or the people working on the ground for Voces Sin Derechos, what challenges they've faced to filming?
Yes. I mean, since February, what we've seen is we've seen an intent from the Venezuelan government to turn protests and activists into criminals. Like, for example, we have February 19, we have Jose Alejandro Marquez. He was last seen in being detained by the Venezuelan army. And a couple of days later, he turns up dead. And a week later, we have Diosdado Cabello, the vice president of Venezuela, accusing him of being a terrorist, showing him in his airsoft gear. Just so people know, airsoft is a sport similar to paintball, but I mean, the guns, there is a smart ammunition, so the guns look like real guns, but they have a different barrel. The vice president of Venezuela is an active member of the armed forces. He had to know this. There's no way that he made this mistake. So it's being that's being, I think that's people weren't prepared for the Venezuelan government coming after the victims so hard. I mean, we had the Attorney General from Venezuela denying in national TV, deny the mistreatment of victims, and in a lot of the cases, the victims were turned into criminals, and that's why we in Voces Sin Derechos we jump to action to kind of show the side, because we heard the vice president, we heard the attorney general, we never heard the victims. You know, the media is so controlled that we never heard the victims. So Voces Sin Derechos, it's trying to do just that, to open a window for the voices to be heard. It's, I mean, people was used to listen to see everybody from the government accusing these people, but nobody saw these people because they had no window to show them. So yeah, I guess that was a challenge that we faced. That's why we decided to keep anonymous the people in Venezuela.
Right. Irene, I'd like to take it back to you, because you mentioned that over time, activists and students filming on the ground started to become more careful and started to learn from the challenges that they faced in the beginning of the protests. Can you talk more about the lessons learned there?
Right. So, for example, the first few videos that we saw, just things as simple as the framing, let's say, of the video, it was framed vertical as opposed to horizontal, or it didn't have a timestamp, and the fact that they didn't describe the timestamp or the actual action that was happening or the place where it was happening gave way for anyone to deny the veracity of the actual footage. So people quickly learned to realize that they needed to be more precise in terms of the who, what, when, where, and why in order for this footage to really be able to be taken as a document. So that's one trend that we saw. Another thing was that NTN24, although it pulled out of Venezuela, it still had some journalists on the ground, but they began to actually on their YouTube channel, they began to include a lot of these citizen videos, these citizen journalist videos on their channel, and they would just simply write, or they would simply disclose that the information wasn't independently verified, but the information, at least the videos, were still being put out there. So I think that's one thing that people quickly learned. I think some of them, maybe the amateur video shooters that were being more consistent in attending all the protests and so on, were also be able to establish contacts with some of the with some media, for example, CNN and so on, and their footage at some point was also used as a source of information whenever the media was not allowed on the ground. So yeah, in general there was just a general improvement in that sense. Just people kind of being a little bit more journalistic about the material that they were obtaining at the protest or what they were watching, as opposed to just simply shooting without knowing. Also, there were several organizations like Provea and of course Video Venezuela as well. We definitely put out some guidelines out on Twitter and on the web, just simply giving people a couple of tips of how to geotag, how to describe their videos, just to really make it easier for other people that were interested in covering what was happening on the ground to be able to identify these videos and later go back to them and use them as evidence or of what was happening.
Great, thank you. Now I'd like to direct the question to both Mayss and Maya. We realize that these challenges, did you realize if there's similar challenges to those that activists in Syria faced in the beginning of the Arab Spring? What ways did they learn and overcome from some of these challenges that Gustavo and Irene have been talking about?
Yeah, Maya, do you want to go?
No, you go ahead and start. I'm not sure about my connection.
Okay, so yeah, basically it looks like the challenges are almost the same. We had at the beginning of the revolution, the regime has banned the mainstream media and every kind of media outlet that might tell a different story from what they have been telling. They have been telling that these people are terrorists and they are going out to kill people, while the videos that we're publishing and putting on YouTube showing the total opposite, showing the government forces shooting children and civilians, but it was only on YouTube. And yes, we had the same challenges of security forces detaining and confiscating equipments of video activists. And also the skills, it was also the same. Many of the people that were taking footage by their mobiles and their videos, they weren't trained, they didn't have any previous experience in media or in filming. And yes, by time we learned many tactics and different ways to do on that. And do you want to talk about it now, Vienna?
I'm sorry, Mayss, you're cutting out a bit. What was that?
First, Maya, do you want to add anything to the challenges and if we have anything more in common with Venezuela?
No, I think you kind of covered it. As far as I heard about the guys from Venezuela.
Okay, and do you want to say more about the tactics and how the video activists managed?
Yeah, the tools, they really started with the younger generation, so you'd have the more tech savvy.
Keep it safe. So that is one.
Maya, you're cutting out a little bit, so let's come back to you. I just want to tell our audience that Gonzalo has come online. Gonzalo is a human rights lawyer at Foro Penal. Thank you, Gonzalo, for joining us.
Hello, how are you, everybody?
We're
I'm sorry.
good. Thank you. No, want to tell the audience just a little bit about yourself quickly?
Well, I am Gonzalo Himiob Santomé. I am a director of the Foro Penal Venezolano, which is an NGO that is in charge right now of assisting the students that have been arrested during the protests since February 2014 until now. We are dealing now with approximately 3,000 cases of people that has been arrested just for participating in the protests. So me and a group of lawyers, we are talking about 500 lawyers nationwide, okay, are voluntarily helping these people that is being arrested during the protests. And also we are dealing with the cases of torture and mistreats by the police forces and the military forces in Venezuela.
Well, thank you for joining the discussion. We were just speaking a little bit about the challenges that activists and students are facing in filming on the ground. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about, this question is for you, Gonzalo. Would you explain for us the fear of working openly as an activist or human rights defender on the ground? What safety precautions are your colleagues taking to either stay safe or remain anonymous for security reasons?
Well, actually, we are trying to do this as public as it possible, okay? Because we have found out that the more open you are, okay, the less risks you face in front of the government. However, they are threatening us, okay? Even the Minister of Internal Affairs and the President of the Congress of Venezuela have issued threats, direct threats, not only against me, but also against Alfredo Romero, which is another director of the Foro Penal Venezolano. And they are also threatening us and that they tell us that they will open criminal investigations against us for treason to the country and rebellion and everything. But we have found that the more public you go with your work, the more open you do your work, the less risk you face, okay, in these cases, in these kind of situations.
Well, thank you. I just want to note that Maya, our video activist from Syria, has dropped out because of internet connectivity. Hopefully she can come back and join us. But Mayss, I'd like to go back to you.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit about the challenges that Middle Eastern and Syrian activists were facing on the ground. I know another concern for media activists is staying safe when sharing their footage online. Can you talk a little bit about how you've trained activists to safely share and preserve their video footage?
Well, okay. So since the beginning, because in Syria, identity concealing and having an alias would help you carry on with your work more than if you are going public, like in Venezuela. Most of the people have created new email addresses, new Facebook accounts, YouTube channels, and an alias that have all other ways of contacts with them. And then they start publishing these videos on their aliases, Facebook or a Facebook page or YouTube. Also, on the other side, because the government is monitoring the access and the internet, and they can like track you, most of the activists would use VPNs or other kinds of softwares that would take you through different proxies that would be harder for anybody to break into your account or follow where you are logging from and get access to you. This is on the technology side.
Right. Thank you, Mayss. Gustavo, I'd like to take it to you because I know your colleagues working on the ground in Venezuela. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm
What are
sorry.
their fears and how they're able to maintain staying anonymous?
Yeah. Well, I have to say I totally agree with Gonzalo. Actually, we discussed this in an earlier occasion. We think that to be the more public, the safer you are. But in the Venezuelan case, I mean, we had another problem. Organizations like Gonzalo's, they're doing a great job for a while, but we've seen for the last couple of months, the government has been targeting like newer, smaller human rights organizations. They actually, in the last couple of months, they raided the offices for Mundo Sin Mordazas and Humano Libre. And so for us, we took a decision to remain anonymous, not only for our ground crew in Venezuela, but for our victims. Because our job is to support organizations like Foro Penal Venezolano or the UCAP Human Rights Group to create a database of the violations of the victims' testimonies to be used in a later occasion to make a case against an international case against the Venezuelan government, because we definitely seen human rights violation, you know, left and right. Yeah, we remain anonymous in Venezuela because we need to have a moment with the victims. I mean, that's why we created. We need this database. We need them to be quiet, to remember all the details of the detentions, all the things that were told to them. So we usually do it. You know, we don't go to protests. We don't go to. We usually do it either in someone's house but yeah, we decided that our crew in Venezuela was to remain anonymous you know, for safety reasons.
Yeah.
Yes, Irene?
Sorry, I just wanted to echo a little bit what was just said, and definitely for us to understand whether it's better for people to be visible or not so visible. It really depends on what they're doing and who they're working with. I agree that Foro Penal Venezolano is completely visible. They're very open about their work. They're doing amazing work. However, as Gustavo also mentioned, the smaller NGOs are kind of being directly attacked and are you know, on live air by different government officials, are being accused of being spies or traitors or terrorists and so on and so on. So what we're seeing is that what doesn't seem to work is being somewhere in between. So either you have to decide to be completely anonymous or completely visible. But it seems like when you're in between, there is a little bit of danger, and this is why we still have students such as Rosmit, for example, Mantilla, you know, in jail now because he seemed to be somewhere in between. So yeah, it becomes a little bit dangerous then. But I completely understand why you would choose to be visible or completely invisible when working.
Yes, I agree with Irene, and I also have to add that when I talk about going public, I talk about the work we're doing, not the evidences, for example. Okay, all the evidences we have, the video testimonies, the medical exams, the you know, the documents that prove that all of this persecution is happening now in Venezuela is of course restricted. We have protected it in several ways, which of course I cannot talk about, but that is important because all of this is the register we are going to take to the international organizations in order to seek for justice at the moment when that is possible. Okay, so we have been protecting the identities of the persons, for example, that are willing to denounce, okay, what is happening in Venezuela, what happened to them precisely. Some people wanted to go public, and we respect that about, for example, the tortures they have been suffering and everything, but some other people wants to go confidential, and we respect that. We have all that evidence protected, of course, and we are using it only in order to take it to the international organisms of protection of human rights.
Yeah. Vienna, I just want to add something. This is very important to realize that when we're talking about video activists who are on the ground, and they are individuals, and maybe they are working with each other as groups, or they are working with providing the other organizations, human rights organizations, and lawyers who are documenting and working on case files. It's different from when we're talking about organizations that are human rights organizations that should be, I think, from my perspective, just what Irene was saying. If they were strong enough, they should be very visible, because that's how we draw the world's attention to the human rights violations that are happening. But at the same time, we from our experience in Syria, you cannot, if the video activists on the ground are known and visible, then they are very much targeted, and then you will lose the people on the ground. Either they will be killed or they will be detained, and you cannot pressure the organization, the government, to release all of them. It's going to be a very long process, and there will be lots of consequences. So we have to make sure to differentiate between when we're talking about individuals and we're talking about organizations.
Right. Thank you, Mayss. For now, I'd like to transition. I know Gonzalo was talking a little bit how you use evidence and video as evidence, images as evidence. I'd like to talk, Gonzalo, this is for you, and anyone else can jump in as well. How is Foro Penal using video as evidence?
Okay, well, the first thing we do is to find out who, for example, in the cases of tortures, of the mistreats of the police and military forces, we found out who is willing to testify, who is willing to give a formal denounce about this. Okay, we have been receiving denounces of tortures and mistreats from the police or the military forces, up to 500 denounces. But we focus only in the people that is willing to go formally to the authorities to denounce that, as a way to, you know, to use first the internal mechanisms of justice, which of course lead to impunity, but it has to be done in order to go later to the international organisms. Okay, we have now at this moment 153 cases fully documented in video, medical exams, photographs, and testimonies of the people that has been tortured and mistreated by the police forces and the military forces here in Venezuela. Okay, there are a lot more, but not everybody is willing to go to the authorities or to the courts even to denounce this. Okay, once we have the names of these persons, we go directly to them all over the country with a camera, and we seize their testimonies in video. Okay, specifically asking them to authorize us to use these testimonies not only for information purposes, but also to support legal actions against the people that is now violating human rights in Venezuela. Of course, we decide, we made an evaluation, okay, about who is in risk and who is not really in risk, okay, when we use this information, okay, because there are cases, very delicate cases, that we prefer to preserve confidential, okay. We have cases of people, members of NGOs that we were talking about before, that had been tortured, that had been pressured, that have been persecuted, okay, and these people have to decide, to personally decide if they want us to use this testimony publicly or in a confidential way, okay. We seize that testimony. We also have medicals, okay, doctors, volunteers that help us in gathering all the evidences, medical exams, for example, that proves the injuries and the damages caused by the people to the people, sorry, in these tortures. Okay, so we support the cases like this. First, we have the written testimony of the victim, then we have the video, okay, and then we have the medical exams that prove that everything that they are telling that they suffer is true. Okay, so we have now 153 cases of that, and we are using these cases in order to take them to the international organisms. Of course, we first go to the formal authorities here in Venezuela, not because we trust them, but because we have to, you know, to fill that step first, okay, to go there first in order to be justified to go to the other international authorities, okay? That is our methodology, okay? We don't use all the testimonies we have because not everybody is willing to formally denounce what is happening. If you see, for example, the numbers of the prosecutor's office here in Venezuela, you see that they are talking about at least 200 cases of human rights violations right now during only this process. So the numbers are very similar to the numbers we have, but that is not because they really want to investigate what is happening in Venezuela. That is because the pressure that the media, the citizens are putting in the government is forcing them to at least recognize that something wrong is happening, and I think that I don't know, the internet, the Twitter, you know, the Facebook, everything has been very helpful, because if they weren't if they don't show the world what is happening in Venezuela, maybe the government doesn't recognize or won't recognize what is really happening, okay? But that is our methodology. We have the written testimony, we have the video, we have the medical exams, and then we have to formally file the denounce about what is happening here, first in Venezuela, and then to the international organism.
Thank you, Gonzalo, for that. I'd also like to open this question to the floor. Mayss or Gustavo, Irene, how are people in your organization using video as evidence? Mayss, would you like to start?
Well, I can start. Yeah. Well, we have to realize that the video is a very debatable. The video as evidence is very debatable. And it's different from one country to another, and it's different on when we're talking about local courts or international courts. However, the video has always, in so many cases in the past decades, has played a role in at least starting an investigation, a criminal investigation in human rights violations. And there are so many cases where the video was actually there in the courtroom. Well, I would say that in the beginning, the video was used to just like show that there is something happening, and there are crimes that are happening in Syria. While after a while, the video activists realized that there are so much things that still needed with the videos that they are posting on YouTube. So they started taking care of like showing what's really happening and being more focused. And also having the correct date and time, of course, on the mobiles and cameras, and filming a landmark that can show where is this happening, because the states in Syria are separated, and we have so many things and human rights violations that are happening in different areas. So basically, that was used for drawing at first the media attention, the world's attention, and now where the lawyers are working on criminal investigations and they are working for local and international courts, they are starting to take from those archives, and archiving is a very important thing for activists to set an archive system. The lawyers are referring to video activists to check their archives for videos that can help as part of the puzzle in a big criminal case they are working on.
Thank you, Mayss. We are actually running a little bit out of time, so I'd like to get final comments from everybody. I want to ask you, each of you, to briefly share why it's important to use video to document human rights violations in your region. We can start with Gustavo.
Yes. Yes. Like actually, we're Gonzalo and Hayes kind of nail it in the nail in the head. Um, because Voces Sin Derecho is like Gonzalo say, we're creating the database, but we also need to show some of the cases in order to stop this this brutality against people. I mean, we have not one but two videos of people showing they clearly show that they're just recording in their cell phones, and the police just without saying anything, they just try to rip their phone from them. We actually have the case in Altamira. It's in episode 3 of our program, let's say. And she was just recording. That's another thing that happens in Venezuela, that the authorities give no information at all. So people took it upon themselves to identify people being detained. Like this video showing in Altamira, she was waiting for her car, and while she waited, she saw Guardia Nacional take it some student, and she started recording. And 5 policemen actually tried to take their cell phone away from her, and she had this video in her personal account, and she started receiving threats. That's why we jump in to kind of to keep having the video and not have her as exposed as she was, let's say. But I feel that we need both in Venezuela, because we need to show people what's really going on the ground. Human Rights Watch made a trip to Venezuela in March this year, and they found out at least 13 cases of people just being detained just because they were recording the protest in their cell phone. Just because of that. Half of these people were journalists, but the other half were everyday people that just decided to record what was going on. And in most of the cases, the cell phone is just taken from them, and when it's returned, it's erased. I mean, this is this is in violation of the laws in Venezuela, and also international laws. So we feel that the video needs to be there to show, and also like we say, in the future we have to, that video have to come with an archive that you can go back and find out what's going on, in order to help associations like Foro Penal Venezolano or Provea or a lot of other organizations.
Thank you, Gustavo. So we're running a little bit out of time. 1 to 2. So Irene, any final comments briefly, since we're short on time here?
Yeah, I just want to add in that I think it's amazing that video can definitely support the work of many of the NGOs and so on and so on. And I think in both of these places, both in Syria and in Venezuela, of course, very different situations up to a certain extent. I think in Syria there's been a lot more brutality, obviously. But, being a video activist or being a citizen journalist has filled a void when media can't get to a place. And I remember very clearly hearing some accounts, and maybe Mayss can correct me or just kind of chime in, but accounts of these makeshift media centers and homes, when Homs was completely being bombarded and so on and so on. And, it was just basically 5 or 8 activists, with a satellite on Skype, getting out to the world what was happening there. And if it weren't for those people that were risking their lives, that center was actually later bombed. If it weren't for them, we would have never had that information. So, and it shows just to the degree where having even a makeshift media center, even if it was a very vulnerable target, was the only reason we knew what was happening in that place. So you know, these video activists, these citizen journalists, many are risking their lives just to fill the void when media is not there or when media cannot get there.
Thank you, Irene. So I'm going to have to wrap it up because we've run out of time, but I want to thank all of our panelists for showing up today.
Can I say just one more thing, Vienna?
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Yes, just a short thing. I think that video, it's a powerful weapon, but has to be used with responsibility. Because in Venezuela, for example, I can tell you from hundreds of cases that we have been participating, legal cases against people that is in the protest, sometimes without the proper guidance of an NGO, for example, those videos publicly shown to the world are used by the authorities to, to criminalize the people that is shown on those videos. So it has to be we have to be very careful, because there is also a dark side of this. The dark side of this is that the authorities also use these videos, okay, made by citizens, in order to criminalize the protest, in order to individualize the people that is participating in the protest, and then prosecute them. Okay, that is all that I wanted to add to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, now I want to just say, I know we're running a lot out of time.
No, please.
So I just want to say that we have to always think of the video, when we're talking about video as evidence, especially, as it's our best way to recreate the crime scene. It's just like the video is putting this person in the place where this violation or this incident has happened, and they are showing them what's really is happening. So this is how the video, this is how much important the role of the video, especially when we're talking about as evidence. So when the even when the international community is standing still and not doing any kind of intervention to stop these atrocities and to stop these violations, at least you can appeal to the international, to the people around the world to support your cause and to put more pressure on their governments to act towards you. And one last tip, if I may say something that could sum it all, is just like, sit in groups and try to critique your videos. Try to be the devil's advocate and try to check on, like, just what he was saying is that the government is using the videos that the activists are posting to criminalize them. So what I think is that they should sit and think about how their videos can be better and improved, and not be used in any other way that could be turned against them afterwards.
Thank you, Mayss. So we've run a little bit out of time. That's all we have for today. I want to thank all of our panelists. Gonzalo, thank you. Irene, Mayss, Gustavo, Maya, who fell off, but we had her a little bit earlier. Thank you for joining Witness Live. And all you watching and participating in the conversation, thank you. Keep an eye on blog.witness.org, where later this week we'll publish a follow-up post that will include links to the information, videos, and resources we talked about here today. If you're interested in verified videos from Venezuela, Syria, or all over the Human Rights channel at www.youtube.com/humanrights. I'm Vienna. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Vienna. Thank you.
Thank you, Vienna.
Thank you.